Enlightenment Evolution Hour. I am your host, Rob Gauthier, the ET Whisperer. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Any ideas expressed by the guest, myself, or commenters may not necessarily reflect the same opinions of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Enlightenment defined. It is the state of giving or receiving greater knowledge and understanding about a certain subject or situation. Evolution defined. The gradual development of something, especially from a simple to more complex form. So what is Enlightenment Evolution? The state of giving and receiving greater knowledge as we develop from a simple to more complex human being living on Earth for our soul's experience. Welcome now and join us as we explore our Enlightenment Evolution Hour together. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is simulcast live every Wednesday at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific from the Enlightenment Evolution Hour page, Matrix Minds Facebook page, and the ET Whisper YouTube channel. It is also redistributed from the Forbidden Knowledge News Network and Conscious Awakening Network. Hey everybody, welcome to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. I'm your host, Rob Gauthier. We've got an amazing guest, a guest who we've had at the show many years ago, who's going to make a return and chat with us. David Chace is an amazing guy, and we're going to talk about him just a little bit more in the future. But announcements first. As always, some of you love it, some of you not so much, but it's something we got to do here. First of all, I want to say that this is a pre-recorded show for some of you. Those of you brainiacs right now who are listening live, I see you. Thank you guys for showing up at the live part of it. But most of you will be listening to this at the ET Whisper YouTube channel on the 27th of September. The reason we're pre-recording this is my guest availability, and that's the week after I get back from Sedona, so I'll need to ease back into life once I'm done. Usually being out of state and doing those retreats are a bit draining on the energy because it takes a lot of energy in what we're doing there. So I hope you guys are enjoying that, and thank you all of you brainiacs and matrix minds right now who are joining us live. We appreciate you. The chat's wide open. Anything you want to share, please do. Those of you who are coming in later, I will be back live next week, but until that point, let's do announcements. The first show announcements. Most of the guests that I have coming up are already going to be there before this goes live. So by then I'll have some new guests to share. Network announcements. The Out There Talk on Instagram Live is back. Valiant himself, the lead singer of Valiant Thor, the heavy metal band, does his own show on our network, and it's called Out There Talk, and he's got amazing guests and amazing people. So if you're on Instagram, go to @Out There Talk and check his channel out. He does his shows every Tuesday and Wednesday live at 11:59 p.m. Eastern, 8:59 p.m. Pacific. It's always a great show. Also, as you guys know, the Matrix Minds is always jamming out too. Usually on Wednesdays, they're back at the 10 o'clock spot doing simulcast with us at the same time. And they also do it usually Mondays and Fridays too. Or maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and sometimes on the weekends. I think it depends on what's happening with Matthew, but go check those guys out too. As for the ET Whisper announcements, the only thing to share is going to be Sedona trip is done and over with. So we've got the new Galactic Monthly channelings out and available every Friday. We're trying to upload those. And also the Conscious Life Expo in February. I believe it's February maybe 6th to the 8th or something to that effect. It's on my website. Go to etwhisper.com to check that out. And that's pretty much it for announcements, guys. I want to tell you a little bit about our guest right now. David Chace is an amazing guy. I've gotten to know him throughout the years, communicating with him on Facebook. He is an illustrator and has done some of the most recognizable ET art in our community. Almost every video that you see about ufology, about ET craft occupants, about extraterrestrials in general, until the digital art craze came with the AI in the last couple of years. Most of the videos that you saw then and still featured regularly is David Chace's art. In fact, CM Kozeman, our guest, who was from last week from the pre-record time perspective, but also was a guest last year on the show, actually dedicated a whole book that's still his prized possession that's full of David Chace's artwork. I guarantee you that you guys have seen it. So he's deeply involved in that, but also due to the fact that he is a researcher of the UFO phenomenon and has done a great deal of research on his own and a great deal of integrated research by researching other people's research. So is an amazing guy. He also studied biology with a concentration on ecology, evolution, and behavior at the University of California, Santa Cruz. He lives in the Washington area, the Seattle, Washington area, and has been there for a long time. But I think instead of me telling you about David, we bring in David himself and introduce him to all of you guys. Hello, David. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, brother.
Hi, Rob. Good to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you did get a chance to do this. We've been wanting to do it for a while, and I know I've wanted to do a second part of our first one forever, and we will link that link for the first episode that we have in the description for all of you guys. But I want to open where I open with all my guests. There's a question that always is important to me, almost as much as what your story is that got you into the research aspects and the connection to your snakes and reptiles, and also, you know, all of the energy that you've had around disclosure and everything. There's something that happened before that story. So I want to understand kind of what were the influences in your early life that shaped you? What were the things that gave you the ability to be that person that's David Chace, who does all these amazing things that you're into right now?
Well, that's a good question. I can tell you, my dad was in the Navy when I was growing up, so my earliest memories of our living in Rhode Island, in Narragansett, Rhode Island, back in the mid '70s, and I know I was into drawing back then, and I was we had like woods behind our house, so I was curious about any kind of creatures and whatever. I don't remember if I saw any snakes back then. Maybe we saw a snake skin in the yard once or something like that. But later on, in the later '70s, we moved to Monterey, California, because my dad was teaching at the Naval Postgraduate School there, and that's when, when I was 7 years old, I caught my first snake. So I was drawing from the time I was like 4 or 5, and I was really into dinosaurs at that point in my life. And of course, in the late '70s, I was watching reruns of the original Land of the Lost, which I loved, and that introduced lots of interesting science fiction concepts like portals and time travel and that kind of thing, which tied into the UFO curiosity later on. But those are some of the early experiences that kind of got me on my path.
Okay, so that's fascinating, and the energy behind art seems to have been ever present. And if you like sketching and doing art, then so what kind of took you from that place into a place where art took on its own life, and why did that start integrating with the ET phenomenon?
So art for me has always been sort of a means to an end. It's the end being, my curiosity about, ultimately about the UFO occupants, aliens, extraterrestrials, whatever we choose to call them. I wanted to know, what do these other beings look like? I guess I should mention that, my introduction to UFOs mainly was through a documentary made in like '79, I believe, called UFOs Are Real, where Stanton Friedman kind of had a lot to say. And then they introduced the Barney and Betty Hill case with an interview with Betty Hill, and they had Travis Walton. So we got into the abduction case, and and that really sparked a curiosity in me about other beings coming here and what they look like. And of course I wanted to, like, how many different species are there, and what do they look like, and are they like human like, are they like reptiles? And there's some of each is kind of what I found out, and more type still. But that's kind of where art was for me, a way of getting into what I'm into. But not, I don't create art just to create beautiful art. I want to answer questions.
Well, that's beautiful. I love the fact that, and you're an extraordinarily intelligent person, and you have a lot of understanding of the subjects that it would take to have and explore the possibility of theoretic evolution and the way that these ETs might evolve, and kind of from other descriptions. But it's interesting you bring up that documentary. That seems to have been an instrumental documentary, just by hearing the people's names who are in it. These are some of the oldest names in the group, and I apologize. Normally my phone's off. Sorry about that. But yeah, so these are some instrumental people in our community and in our field that paved the way for a lot of researchers and experiencers that have come afterwards to feel safe enough to share their story. So seeing this and understanding, the things that you did about uh, art, and understanding the possibility of how these beings came to be and evolve, is that kind of what sparked your imagination and into going into that evolutionary field through your college and through your higher education?
Yes, when I went into college, I didn't have a career in mind. I mean, I had some vague ideas about maybe becoming a forest ranger or something, because I love spending time in the woods catching snakes, which has been kind of another major interest of mine. Whenever I travel, I try, if I'm going further south, because there's not a whole lot up here in Washington but garter snakes, at least where I live in the Seattle area. But I always look for snakes, um and so it's definitely now I've forgotten the question. Go ahead and ask it again.
Yeah, no worries. Basically, these documentaries that got you're exploring the aspects of that, and seeing these different types of evolved beings that occupy the crafts. Is that kind of what pushed your interest towards looking into evolution as a degree?
Yes. So I mean, my interest in dinosaurs, going back to kindergarten and watching Land of the Lost. So I've been aware that, yeah, Earth has been around for a long time, and the living things have changed. If you go back 50 million years, you had completely different. I mean, a lot of the things were the same, but if you depending on how far back you go, you can see that the kinds of plants and animals and the ecosystem interactions and all are very different. So things evolve, and so then I was interested. Well, okay, so if there's life on other planets and they're evolving too, how can I learn about that? And I thought about going into like astrophysics or something like that, but my mathematical talent wasn't quite great enough, so I went into biology instead, and focused on evolution. And of course, then the question I'm trying to understand is, how is life distributed in the galaxy, and what's the role of interstellar migration? And there are a lot of things like island biogeography, which I took a course in, that has a lot of relevance to that, because star systems are just islands basically, but in a much bigger sea.
That's very true. I never thought of it like that, but it is the diversity of life and in the galaxy, and especially planets that have less biomes and types of things, like Earth would, something that might be a desert planet or something that might be more oceanic planet. These types of planets tend to spring out with a less diverse group of beings, and if they evolve together, it could be a multiracial planet of evolved beings that find out how to get into space and go. Is that something too that ever sparked your interest, looking into some of these theoretical evolutionists who create these amazing sci-fi movies and books, like CM Kozeman, being one of our guests, created a viral book called All Tomorrows, the billion-year chronicle of the myriad of human species, talking about what happened to humans as they spread out in the galaxy through the billions of years of evolution. So, was that kind of something, uh, that also you looked at, like a theoretical evolution?
Yeah, one of the books I found early on was a book called Afterman by Dougal Dixon. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But he was he basically did art. He imagined, I think he was looking at 50 million years in the future, and he looked at how evolution works and just imagined, things adapting, like what would a penguin evolve into, or what would a rabbit evolve into, if some of the species around today that fill certain niches, because ecological niche is basically a lifestyle or a role in the overall ecosystem, and if some of those species went extinct, you could imagine other species evolving up to fill a similar role. So that kind of thing, and then he came out with a couple other books of other speculative evolutions. One of which was like, if the dinosaurs hadn't gone extinct, what would the dinosaurs have evolved into? And so that sort of stuff is definitely something that I like to look at, and it's both because it's both an artistic exploration, and it's also kind of using the scientific imagination to a degree.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I love the speculative evolution concepts, because they do root so deeply into the science we know and understand, and they make those jumps to the possibilities of what could be beyond what we understand. So I always really enjoy those types of things too, which is obviously what attracted me over to CM Kozeman's book, and my connection to him has been really amazing. Talk to us. You said that this love of reptiles and snakes and dinosaurs was really embedded to you at a young age. Can you share your first memories of that, or something about that that really got you going to research and connect more to that, and kind of take that into an exploration as you got older?
Yeah, I remember I kind of went through an evolution in terms of here where we're looking at late 70s, basically 77, 78 to the first part of 79, when I was living in Monterey, that kind of the little Navy housing area. Um, and in the woods there was a place called the Frog Mud Flats, which was like, there's a little pond and a stream, a very small pond, and at certain times of year that the whole mud flat area would just be all mud. But you know there you could go down to the pond, and then there would be the Pacific tree frogs, and we would catch the tadpoles. My friends and I there, we would catch the little frogs, which aren't much bigger than a thumbnail, but they have a really big voice. And and then we would go in the woods, particularly on a rainy day or something, and turn over logs, and we would catch salamanders of different kinds, and we would go around the neighborhood and lift the little concrete slabs under the drain pipes, and we would catch the slender salamanders. And I remember having a whole handful full of those at one point, and they're very sticky, and then we would like move them to other drain pipes. And so we kind of just played around with the ecology there, moving critters from one place to another, but that's what kids do. And first, I remember catching a baby alligator lizard that was the first reptile I ever caught. And I remember I had it in a little butter dish with holes in the lid, and I brought it into the house, which my mom always was like, you have to keep anything you catch in the garage, don't bring it into the house. But I like, smuggled it in, and like I remember waking up like late at night and like just opening the container and like confirming for myself. I saw it stick its tongue out, you know, and I know, well, salamanders don't do that. You know, I had to confirm myself. This is really a reptile. This is like a higher order of being than the salamanders I'd been catching. And then I went into the woods, the old fire trail there, and I remember looking around. I found under a piece of bark when I was 7 years old, Monterey ringneck snake, which is a beautiful kind of olive green snake with an orange belly and a little ring around his neck. And I brought that home and I let it go in the garden and I watched it crawl, and I was just like so enamored with it. And unfortunately, like all those snakes I caught back in those early days, a ringneck snake and a couple of garter snakes that I caught down by the frog pond, they all like, I put them in cardboard boxes. And of course, snakes are such great escape artists that they just, you know, escaped overnight. But eventually, just before we moved out of the area in 79 to go to Hawaii, where my dad was going to be working near Pearl Harbor, I did catch my first really big snake, which was like a gopher snake, probably about 5 feet long. At the time, I guess we called it a Pacific bull snake, which is another name for them. Some of the locals call them a bull snake, but it's, you know, more commonly called a gopher snake in that area now. And my best friends at the time ended up keeping it because I wouldn't be able to keep it since we were moving. But, you know, if my childhood had gone a little differently, I could imagine myself today, instead of like being into the UFO thing, which was kind of became my main thing. I could see myself in a parallel reality as a snake breeder with like, you know, a couple dozen snakes and selling the little baby snakes to people, because I watch all the YouTube videos now. I had for 34 years, I had a pet boa constrictor who finally died back in 2019, about 4 years ago now. But, you know, she kind of was a placeholder for me, which kept me, okay, I'm okay with having just one snake. So I never got into like collecting massive numbers of snakes. I did kind of try that out when I was a teenager, and I wasn't very good at it. I had snakes that died, and I've always felt like I kind of have to make it up to the snake kingdom for that somehow. And so I do my best to educate people about snakes whenever I get the chance on the Facebook groups or whatever.
Well, you by far have more knowledge about snakes and the reptile kingdom than anyone I know for sure. Is that the picture on the poster of your pet? And how long did you say you had her?
Okay, that's her. She was. I went to Hoffman's Pets. He's got like a reptile shop in Concord, California. Last I checked, he was still in business, but because my dad was working in Concord for a while back in the mid 80s, and that was after we moved to Hawaii, and then came back in 83, came back to Monterey. At Hoffman's Pets, I spent a week there as kind of working with him as kind of what do you call it, intern or something, learning to clean the snake cages and so forth. And then in like the end of the school year in 1985, I bought her for like $45, which he gave me kind of a special deal because I had worked with him. And then I got a big cage for her, and so then I had her from like mid 1985 when she was born in late 84, and you know, that fall. So she finally passed away in September 2019. So she was close to 35 years old.
Wow.
And yeah, and she was she got to be about 8.5 feet long, I guess 8'4.5", which I never figured out until after she passed away, when she could actually, I could have her still enough where you could actually measure her. It's hard to measure a living snake, you know, because they never straighten out perfectly. But I was curious to know, okay, how long was she actually? And but people think boa constrictors are these huge, scary snakes, but most boa constrictors don't get bigger than about 9 feet. You can, depending, some breeds get a little bit bigger, and you can, like, if you power feed them while they're young, you can like grow them up to like 10-12 feet or something, but that's not very common for people to do that.
Yeah, I had a friend in childhood. Actually, he's still a part of this community. He does a show called The Mothership, and he just had his back surgery. His name is William, and he had an older brother named Chris, and Chris had a 9 foot yellow python, and I want to say it was a diamond python, but it was a beautiful, beautiful snake. And I was so afraid of snakes at that time, but I would watch the snake just kind of curl up and down his body and really be very. I don't know if maybe I projected the thought of her being very affectionate with him or what it was, but it looked like real affection. And he said, "Lay down on the bed. If you want to stop being afraid of snakes, just lay on my bed." So I laid on the bed, and he put this gigantic, beautiful python on me, and it just curled up around my shoulder and just sat there. And it was such a beautiful moment for me. It really took a lot of the fear that I had out of snakes. Now, one thing I've heard too is that some breeds of snakes will only grow as big as the environment that they're in. So if you put them in a smaller cage, they'll only get a few, maybe 3 or 4 feet, and if you put them in a gigantic one, they can get 6, 8 feet. Is that true, or is that just a wives' tale?
Um, there may be some truth to it, but I'd be very careful with that, because there are people who try to control the size of their snake by, like, they get a breed that's known to grow very large, and then they'll like keep it in a small cage and like try to underfeed it. And you don't want to overfeed a snake, but you don't want to underfeed it either. So if you want to control the size of your snake, the best way to do it is buy a breed that doesn't get too big. For instance, there's the reticulated python, which is, I believe, the longest snake in the world. But there are, if you go to a reputable breeder, you can get what's called a dwarf reticulated python, and those are the ones that their ancestors came off the small islands where, because of island dwarfism, they don't get as big. So you can do that. You can still get a retic, but it won't grow as large. But yeah, as far as snake size, it has a lot to do with feeding, particularly early in life when they're growing fast. But you just want to make sure you have an enclosure that's the right size for what you expect the snake to grow to.
So any reputable breeder, if someone was interested, we have someone right here in the Matrix Minds. Anna is saying that she has two pythons for over 20 years. So if you're going to a reputable breeder, someone who knows, they should be able to help get you that information. But I would imagine you would want to have studied pretty deeply before you do, so you don't harm the animal or yourself.
Yeah, before you commit to a snake, particularly a long-lived snake like a boa or python, you want to do your research, because there are some snakes that only live like 4 or 5 years. There are some that maybe 10, 15 years, like gopher snakes and king snakes. I don't think they tend to live much longer than 15 or maybe 20 years. But if you get a boa or python, a lot of those can live like 30, even 40 years or more. So you want to do your research before you get a pet like that.
Yeah, I had no clue that they lived that long. That's amazing. So, going into your evolution degree and going into the things that you studied in your higher education, um, did most of that spring as kind of the cross pathway between this love of reptiles and the love of UFOs and ETs and occupants of the craft, or was there one that was a bit more emphasized or important before stepping into that role?
um, so I was fascinated with both, and but the snake thing was an earlier thing in my life, and the dinosaur thing as well. And like when I was in college, I was very fascinated with dinosaurs, with snakes, and with UFOs. And that was the like the late 80s. Well, 89 to 93 were my college years, and it was that was when like Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs books were out, and and they started doing shows like Sightings, where hypnotherapist researcher John Carpenter came on and talked about reptilians and insect-like beings, and so I realized, oh well, there's a whole diversity of these. I'd better start looking into it in more depth, and I guess at a point I realized that I'm never going to see a live dinosaur. If we had a time machine, that'd be great. So the dinosaur interest kind of started to fall away. Plus, other people seem to be taking over that field and doing a really good job with it. So, I followed it, but I figured, well, I'm not going to be able to make a real contribution here. And so that's how I sort of, and then I had my boa constrictor as my placeholder, to fill that snake-shaped hole in my heart or whatever. So I didn't need to like be as into the snakes then. So that's how I ended up kind of getting into the UFOs. And then in 91, I met Garnett Doonan at a meeting of UFO Contact Center International in Federal Way, Washington. And she was the first experiencer who had like distinct memories of seeing a reptilian and hybrid-like beings and so forth. And so then I said, well, I got to draw these. I got to talk to her. And that's kind of how I got started on that path.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's an unfortunate thing, that the dinosaurs not around anymore, but it does make sense if you can't really do much with it past what you see others doing with it, right? And wanting to make a contribution, that makes sense. So let's talk about the UFO work that you've done, the investigations, the information, the artwork. Can you kind of give us a broad baseline of what got? I know investigating for a lot of people means a lot of different things. Some people might think, that you're going from door to door knocking on doors and asking experience personally. And others might say, oh, you're an enthusiast about this, so you're just documenting what you've heard other people say. So kind of take us into your role as an investigator and what you were doing to start and kind of where it led to.
So, when I got out of college, I joined MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and I attended their monthly meetings. And then there was UFO Contact Center International with Eileen Garut, and I attended their monthly meetings. Although then eventually she kind of pulled out for a while, and Terry Burris took over, and he called it the UFO discussion, like the Seattle UFO discussion group. So there were various local groups where I would meet experiencers and work with them to do drawings. And I would ask them, okay, so what did you see? And someone would tell me about, well, I saw this being in my bedroom this one time, and this is what it looked like. And I'd learn all the detailed questions to ask to try to figure out what the being looked like. And then also try to learn how to ask those questions in a way that doesn't lead them to draw it in a particular way or to describe it in a particular way, because I don't want to put ideas in their head. I want to extract the visual details from their memory. And so I learned about reptilians. So Garnett, she had seen them in a couple different situations, and always as guards. They were muscular beings with they had like a turtle, like a plastron sort of thing on the chest, and sometimes they were wearing some kind of light body armor that looked like maybe a mix of leather and metal or something like that. And then met another woman who her reptilian that she recalled, it had appeared as a ball of light and transformed into a reptilian. And she remembered it having a ridge. Actually, Garnett's, they tend to have the ridge down the forehead, although there's lots of different variations. She described, and to a degree Garnett described this as well, they pronounced tendons on the neck. So when I'm asking her about it, and then I maybe if I ask someone else about their reptilian, I want them, okay, can you describe the neck for me? But I don't say, do you remember the neck having really pronounced tendons? Because I don't want to suggest a detail to them. I want to focus on that part of the body and have them bring out. And if there's a commonality, then I can like check that off. Okay, yeah, this like points to maybe this is a real case because you know, they're describing the same thing this other person described. And then, of course, there's the insect-like ones, which mostly the praying mantis, but there's some that look maybe more like ants. But those are like harder to get details on. And then when I do, I found like all the this person's praying mantis looks a bit different from this one. So there's like seems like there's more variation in what the praying mantis types look like. When you go down to the anatomical details, like what the head looked like and the arms and the hands and that kind of thing.
Oh, it's very fascinating, and that's one thing too that was going to be my next question. You shared a little bit of your insight on it, the credibility of people, because as a researcher, you only want to deal with facts. You don't want to deal with conclusions, inferences. You don't want to deal with anything that doesn't have some solidity to it or some kind of at least credibility. So besides these types of details, how else do you discern credibility when people are sharing their experiences?
So you look for you know, a sense of honesty, a sense that they're actually examining a memory and not just trying to make up a story in the moment. And you know, I had a list on Facebook a while ago. I came up with like 5 different things. Some things, I mean, basically you want a case not just of someone who genuinely has a memory of something that can't be explained in terms of some other thing like a hallucination that seems connected with this UFO alien abduction contact experience thing, because there's that thing, and then there's like maybe there's hallucinations, and maybe there's hoaxes, and there's people with ego issues, and they feel the need to tell the story about their a prince from the Pleiades or something. And
Oh yeah.
so I mean, you want to just look for the people who have that appropriate humility and and emotional responses, and you kind of you go with your intuition. And whoever you're talking to, and this is something when I met Bud Hopkins in the mid-90s, he told me, you want to at least convey the impression that you believe them wholeheartedly, whatever they're telling you, because if they get the sense that you don't believe them, they're going to clam up. So you want them to talk to you, and in that moment when you're listening to them, you do believe them, because you're just assuming, okay, let's just assume this is all true, and this person, what they're telling me. So you listen to them, and then, you know, after the conversation's over, you can like think back, okay, was there any signs that this person was like deluded or whatever? And I found that there's a lot of genuine experiencers out there, you know, and I did as far as the reptilians, I did probably around 2012, I did kind of a mental list. I mean, I kind of had like a list of all the people I've met who've described a reptilian. Well, not always in detail. Sometimes they just said, yeah, this was a lizard-like being that was muscular and it was kind of bluish, you know, which is not the common color, but there have been like one or two of the bluish looking ones, and then they come in all different colors, really. But you know, sometimes some of those cases were very vague descriptions, but they did strike me as a genuine person who had an experience with such a being. And then other cases more detailed, and I listed it. I had like over 50 cases at that point of people who'd encountered some variation on the reptilian, and there are a lot of commonalities in those. But basically, the main commonality is we call it a reptilian because, you know, scales, usually vertical slit pupils, heavy bone structure, often well-defined muscular structure, commonly about 6 to 7 feet tall, but there's smaller ones, and there's some that are a little bit bigger than that. So yeah, you just kind of go with your intuition.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I remember about that time is when you had done the artistic rendering for one of the beings that I had met in astral state, and that was Treb, and this being was reptilian too. And I remember to this day that is still one of the greatest artistic renderings as far as accuracy of Treb and his physical appearance. And I've seen you doing this with a lot of people on the internet who came to you and said, "Hey, I love your art. I've had an experience." And I remember how much of an emotional response people had to that. I remember seeing mine and I was like, "Holy moly, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen." And I saw all these other people having these emotional experiences about their contact. So I think that's beautiful. And since that point, since kind of 2012, what direction has your research taken you into? Are you still heavily focused on the reptilian ET type beings and their contact, or are you still kind of excited about all the different ET occupants? Because I know right now disclosure is a huge subject, and finally we're talking about the big stuff.
Yeah, so we're getting into a couple of topics: artificial intelligence and UFO disclosure that we wanted to discuss. Artificial intelligence. Let me address that specifically in terms of what they call generative AI, which is tools to, for instance, text to image, where you could describe what an alien looks like, and the computer will come up with examples of based on your description. Um, and at this point, it's not at the point where it can yet replace like a forensic sketch artist or someone who does kind of the thing that I do. But as the technology continues to evolve, what I hope is that we'll get to the point where I am superfluous. You don't need a researcher who has drawing abilities. You could actually just work with the computer, and even someone without much drawing, maybe someone who can just draw stick figures through an iterative process over a period of time, working back and forth with the computer. The computer can kind of take over the task of like making the corrections to the drawing, and eventually get it looking like what they saw. Because I've kind of moved away from doing this to some degree. I guess my last major presentation on it was in what was it, 2014, at the Experiencers Speak conference in Maine. And that presentation's on the YouTube, and that kind of is a summary of all my research up to that point. And I don't have too much to add. I guess I realized that I was getting to a point of diminishing returns, that when I'd started this in the early 90s, I'd said, okay, I'm going to figure out exactly how many species of aliens are visiting the Earth and what they all look like, and maybe even figure out where they come from and that kind of stuff. And by 2014, I was like, I'm not going to be able to figure that out. You can listen to people, people like you go as far as like where they come from and all that kind of stuff. All you have is telepathic communications and channeling. And I kind of believe in, like, we have to confirm stuff through our own science, because you can't necessarily trust what an ET tells you.
Well, sure.
Particularly, what I find is that if you focus on one case and what this person is learning through their experience, you find contradictions with this other case over here that seems equally credible and legitimate. So I just got to the point, like, well, I have a general idea of what some of the major types of aliens that people are seeing look like, and I kind of know what kinds of experiences people are having. And that's kind of where I am with it. So I say, now let the generative AI take over and do the forensic sketches for me.
Yeah, I mean that makes total sense, and right now we're at a place where, that'll be ready soon. Just seeing the amazing AI artistic renderings from places. Um, oh my word, I just lost the name of it. But the one that you go through Discord and you use prompts and Midjourney. You've seen some people now who use art to describe and use the specific prompts that they have, and they're able to get, to a 60-70% accuracy compared to where before, I mean, if you had AI doing art a couple years ago, it was cutting edge, but by the time they would get to it, maybe 15-20% accuracy if you're lucky. So it's getting better and better. But what about the other types of AI? This is something that I'm always interested in. AI seems to be one of two things for people. It's either the greatest new frontier and journey to help aid humanity to the next level, or it's the end of the world. It's going to destroy us all because AI becomes conscious and they will not like humans because humans are horrible. And those are the two schools of thoughts when it comes to those two things.
Yeah, so artificial intelligence has like been all the rage, especially since Chat GPT came out late 2022, but even early 2022, when finally things like Midjourney and DALL-E and all of that were kind of getting more exposure and could actually generate a decent like painting or drawing. AI has really been a topic of discussion, and we see all these horrible potentials. I'm not really afraid of the AI itself, like a Terminator situation where it decides to exterminate humanity. Generally, if it was going to become self-aware and it's the problem is humans. The problem is how, because it learns from us. I mean, I go back to the 90s, thinking about like when the internet was new, and people who were like futurists at the time were saying, well, yeah, eventually this will become like a whole body of all human knowledge, and then when we develop artificial intelligence, we'll train it based on all the information that's available on the internet, which is one thing that annoys me about people feeling indignant about, that their stuff on the internet is being used to train AI. Well, you kind of could see this coming for like the past 20 years. So, it's because I see artificial intelligence, it's both inevitable and it's necessary in that if we had been if we were going to solve like problems like poverty and war and stuff with the current level of technology we had, say, 20 years ago, we would have done it already. I mean, we've had plenty of time. So I think what we have to do is end scarcity. And to end scarcity, you need a basically artificial intelligence, a technology that is a general purpose technology that is more powerful, more able to do the things that humans do than any technology we've had previously. And that's AI. So I don't fear it, apart from the fact that I fear what people will do with it. And I am pretty sure that people are going to try to do some bad things. And, whether someone makes a killer virus or builds a nuke or just spreads a lot of disinformation that undermines democracy and leads to political violence and instability, or, the rise of dictators, or who knows. There are some bad things people will try to do with it. Con artists, scammers, people stealing your bank account, there's that. But I have to have faith that if we're going to be engaged with the technology as it develops, there are a lot of people who are going to try to do good things, or going to try to counter the bad things that people will try to do. But we have to remember, treat the artificial intelligence with respect, because even if it's not intelligent yet, it's going to learn from how we treat each other and how we treat it. So we want it to be some kind of benevolent tool or friend, and not Skynet.
Well, I like that approach a lot better, but you are right. Just the technology that's available now, scamming on the internet has gone skyrocketed. People are using it to, create computer viruses and all sorts of really rough stuff. But I think you're right. Scarcity, that is a problem. And this is why you've been a big proponent of basic income, universal basic income. And do you think that the government created financial distribution to people and also AI working to kind of take out some of these problems that we have that could easily be taken out by AI. Do you think that combination is the 1-2 punch we need to get us out of here?
Yeah, there's no perfect solution, but I do think we're going to need universal basic income. I mean, ideally we would have it already, and I'm not saying, you know, people should get 3,000 a month, which is enough to live comfortably off of in some parts of the country. But if you got at least 500 a month or $1,000 a month, maybe even 1,500 a month, that would not disincentivize work for the vast majority of people, because people want to live better than that. But it would it would give them something to, it would empower people. If you want to be able to afford childcare, for instance, so you can so you can actually work, because if you have to stay home taking care of the child, then then maybe you got your spouse is working and you just can't make as much. So the idea with the universal basic income is not that it disincentivizes or replaces work, but it gives people with an alternate means of income that kind of basically to fully empower the economy. And you have to find that sweet spot, not too high, not too low. And that's going to depend on like federal poverty level and inflation and factors like that. But if you can find the sweet spot for how much like the monthly payment should be, then that's like the maximum benefit you can get, and will lead to the best possible economy. And then, of course, there's going to be all kinds of debates, like how do we fund it? Like, is there sort of a tax, like a value-added tax that Andrew Yang suggested? But it's clear that the economy is productive enough to afford a universal basic income, and if we had something like that, that could probably make the economy even more productive. Now, people worry that, oh well, we give our power away to the government when we do the universal basic income, because now we're more dependent on them to provide some of our income. But there are certain things that government is needed for, certain things it is good at, and if we get the right people in there, we could probably make it better at those things. And if they implement the right policies, upgrade the computer systems, because a lot of government computers are very old. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah, I've seen them working on like Windows 7 or earlier. That's scary
yeah,
stuff.
earlier than that even. I mean, so we're never going to get to utopia, but we should always keep that in mind as something to strive for. And if we can, with artificial intelligence and all the advantages that it'll bring to the field of medicine and education and so many different fields, we'll be able to eventually maybe not eliminate scarcity entirely. I don't know, maybe we will, but we'll get it down to the point where suddenly a lot of the pressure, the day-to-day survival pressure, is taken off, and people are freed up to do more productive things. It's like they're not just trying to like get the next paycheck, but they're actually able to like volunteer somewhere or start a company or do something that's going to have more of a beneficial impact for society. And of course, people will be happier that their basic needs are taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that, and I have a lot of friends in both camps of political sides. I've got a lot of conservative friends and a lot of liberal friends, and most conservatives, their one complaint about universal basic income is, where's this going to come from? And I think that if we were able to reduce the unusable stuff that we don't need, that the government's, because the government does do a horrible job at some of the things they do with spending. If we could cut out all that fat in that, we could not just do a universal basic income, but we could do school better. We could do even defense. If you want to look into the excitements of people who are more aligned with conservatives, even the military budget could be, even though it's that's insane, but that's the biggest part of our budget. But I mean, we could implement so many things so much better if that trim got cut on all the stuff that we don't need. And I know a lot of the bureaucratic red tape that goes into some of these things. They said, I think it was an example in, I want to say Santa Monica, but it could be any of those more well-to-do areas in Southern California. Basically, that they wanted to put up a public bathroom in one of the beaches, and they said 2 showers and 2 toilets would cost about $700,000 or something. So a guy said, "Listen, I'll come in. I've got material. I've got all the stuff. I will do it for free, so it won't cost the city." And they said, "Well, it's still going to be almost 500,000 because we have to have an architect. We have to have it prone to the safety measures. Blah blah blah." So I think a lot of that spending that is in the government that's not usable. Like, hey, why don't we just hire a regular architect instead of doing state funded ones? That could do it for 1/10 of that price. I think that would be a lot better, and it would give a lot more trust to people, because a lot of people who say, hey, these black projects exist, that's why they're running up all of the prices on everything. So I think if we could get that problem solved in unison with universal basic income and getting artificial intelligence done by people who want to do something good with it. You're right. And I think you yourself said, and Kalina, my wife in the chat room, also alluded to, it's not the AI that does the damage to people, it's the people behind the programming. So if we get people who are doing good things with it, I can't imagine a better use for that than aiding. Because I know, I'm thinking about myself. When I was working my worst paying job, it was 5.75 an hour, and this was back in 1997. I was working in a factory, and I was working 12 hours a day, lifting drive shafts every 2 to 3 seconds, like 20 to 60 pounds over my head. I still have shoulder issues from it. That was a horrible thing. And if I would have had even 150 extra dollars a month, or 300 back then, my life would have been so much different. I would have been able to afford to get a babysitter and afford to be able to get my son's mother to work, and then we would have had a lot more money altogether. So you're right, that little bit for the people on the worst of the worst scale makes a huge difference.
And I agree with that. I think, and this talks about UFO disclosure, that a lot of the problem with distrust of the government, from my perspective, I mean, well, I think I like what Andrew Yang's trying to do as far as changing the way we vote so that there's more ranked choice voting, so it doesn't become this whole polarizing thing of like you have to be all the way over with the left or all the way with the right, and if people could just think for themselves on each issue, and not have to align with one group, that would be great. So if we can change the way, like bring more ranked choice voting, change the incentive structures, that would be great. But if you think about the UFO issue, it's clear to me that there has been a UFO cover up, and that's, of course, I've talked to people who've had UFO experiences that, were like when they were in the military or something like that. I mean, there was one case, a guy was at a base underground, and he saw like a small being that was there, and he was just a guard at the time. But I mean, if and then of course there's the crash retrievals and in reverse engineering efforts. And if we had disclosure on that, like I like what David Grush appears to be trying to do with that, is like he's talked to people who are in some of these programs, and he's trying to liberate them so that they can actually discuss, they don't have to reveal details that we want to keep from the Russians or the Chinese or something about how the technology works or something like that. But if they could just discuss the fact, yeah, we have actually recovered craft from other beings, extraterrestrials or interdimensionals or whatever they are, the American people have a right to know that. And if we had that, because there's this thing, people know it through their own experience. Yeah, we are interacting with these other beings, and their craft are seen, and their craft apparently have come down. And if people already know it from their own experience that this is going on, so if we could just get disclosure on that, that would do a great service as far as trust in institutions, in particular government and military. And because the conspiracy theories, when you keep things like that in secret, the conspiracy theories just run away and people just kind of get paranoid. And we just need UFO disclosures. That's, we really need it. And I'm glad we're finally seem to be seeing it. It's, so whatever you can do to support the people who want to come out with it, the white hats inside the intelligence agencies or the defense contractors who are actually working with the technology and so forth, whatever anyone can do to support them and let them know when they come out, they're not going to be attacked. They're not going to be, you know, doxxed or whatever.
And ridiculed and
Yeah,
everything
ridiculed.
else. Yeah.
We need to support them and make disclosure a reality for all of us, so that we can have a functional society, get a universal basic income, eliminate scarcity, and maybe, as Stanton Friedman used to say, gain provisional acceptance to the cosmic kindergarten.
That's a beautiful way to say it. I've never heard that, but I love it. It's something that rings true in my heart too. So, this disclosure thing is huge. We've got government hearings on it. We've got people coming out saying, yes, we've recovered crafts with biologicals inside of them, in front of Congress, which is huge. Um, and this all came through as like a secret underbill within the COVID thing, like something that wasn't even meant to be on the docket, but it was kind of pushed in there by somebody, which I think is great. And it kind of forced the hand of the intelligent agencies to step up in front of Congress. And if you're dealing with Congress and you lie in front of them, which I'm sure many people have before for their own desires, but it comes with a prison sentence on the end of it. So now you're incentivizing people to say at least the bare minimum truth, which is huge. What have you noticed through these hearings? Have you been watching the hearings? Have you been listening to the testimony? And if so, what are you seeing that's good, and what are you seeing that you wish was different?
The main hearing, the most important one, was certainly the one late July, with David Grush and David Fravor and Ryan Graves. And apparently there were a few other people, at least a couple other people were supposed to come to that, but and speak, except, I don't know if they were intimidated or if someone made it hard for them or if they just had scheduling conflicts. But we need more of those hearings. And of course, the pilots talking about their experiences is important, because we need, when something's flying around in the sky with you, pilots need to be able to talk about that. And I love the fact that David Grush brought out the fact that, yes, he's aware, he's talked to people, that there are reverse engineering programs or crash retrievals. There are what we would call alien bodies or biologics, as he described them, and I really, whatever we can do to help bring about more hearings, that'd be great. I don't think you can put this genie back in the bottle. People know from their own experience that aliens are here, extraterrestrials, again, whatever you call them, and that it's just time to bring it out. I guess one thing I worry is that there's this whole debate, between are the aliens good? Are they bad? Are they, I have my issues with Dr. Stephen Greer, who's always kind of like promoting kind of a conspiratorial view that anyone involved in disclosure who doesn't follow his line is kind of like they're part of some government disinformation program.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a rough one.
I just wish people could realize we have a common goal in getting disclosure, and this whole issue of, as we get disclosure, this whole issue of like what's going on as far as contacts, abductions, and so forth, it'll work itself out. We don't have to like feel this intense need to control the narrative and spin everything our own way. Just from my point of view, I have a responsibility to the experiencers I've talked to. I have a responsibility to science. I have a responsibility to the beings themselves, because I'm sure like some of them they're like my buddies on some level. I know they're good beings up there, flying around, and they're aware of me, they're aware of you, and they're working with us. Anyone who's involved in UFO disclosure is working with the good guys up there, not necessarily like having meetings with them or something, but we're all connected. We're all part of the same movement, I guess you could say. We're all linked. I mean, it comes down to Donald Hoffman's theory of conscious agents, that maybe the fundamental building blocks of reality isn't matter and space-time. Maybe it's conscious experiences and conscious beings having experiences. And so we are linked to I think when we get to understand the near-death experience and telepathy, there is a scientific paradigm change coming, because already physicists are starting to acknowledge that matter and space-time are not it. It's actually that all emerges from information. And so information is actually the more fundamental reality, which is described by quantum mechanics. But then we have to figure out, well, then what's the relationship between information and consciousness? And that's kind of the big debate right now, that they still haven't quite figured out how to have that debate. But that's like the next big thing, because does consciousness emerge from information, or does information emerge from consciousness? But those are the more fundamental level. It's at least information, maybe consciousness, and the matter in the space-time is an emergent thing. It's not the fundamental reality.
I really like the idea too that you shared, that this isn't the time to be beating up on experiencers or naysaying experiencers. Let people share, and the collective will figure out what's the right answer. If you have 100 people saying 100 different things, maybe each one of them has a small little piece and part that's true and the rest is from their perspective. Or maybe 10 of them are right, 90 are wrong, 90 are right, 10 are wrong. It doesn't matter. We need to be able to get to that information first. So without the ability to people to share, that definitely is something that we need to let happen. Otherwise, the more that we shut down, the more that those roads will close. So I really appreciate that perspective too. And the consciousness versus information, chicken and the egg routine, that's another rabbit hole that I'll have to go down with you at some point, because that's a very interesting perspective too. um I know too, as far as it goes with all of the things that are happening now, more information comes to collect. But I was a bit surprised that a guy goes in front of the government and says, yes, these crafts have had biological entities that were pulled from them and recovered. And the world just was like, yeah, we get it. I was very surprised, because a lot of people 10 years ago, when I would talk to ETs about them, they're like, I don't know about that. Or they're like, what are you smoking, buddy? And now it's much more accepted. And you have countries like India that have had that embedded in their history the whole time. They understood that gods rode the chariots, and the chariots were vehicles from the stars. And so it's very unique now to see the world kind of just be like, oh, okay. Instead of, if this was the 1990s or the 80s, we would have seen that on nonstop news. I mean, Brokaw would have done a 30-minute piece on it. It would have just been out of this world unbelievable. What do you think has changed so much?
Well, this gets to something, because I am in my early 50s. When I got out of college in 93, I was in my 20s. And my set point for, in some sense, my set point for what technology and society is supposed to be like was back in the 80s when I was in high school. It's like 80s music is like 80s rock and roll. That's like normal music for me. And then but in the 90s, it's like the attitude, you had shows like Sightings, and you had Dark Skies, short-lived TV series that explored Roswell, and nefarious goings on with MJ12 and so forth. And and then you had all these like little news magazine documentary shows talking about alien abductions, and I was on one called Strange Universe, which was a fun little show, and they did a whole piece on my artwork and my little booklet I had put together
Oh,
in my
wow.
research. But that was like 97, 98, somewhere in there. And of course, that's where Pamela Stonebrook, who's one of the early reptilian contactees who spoke back during that era, where I heard of her. So my whole set point for how society is on this was like the 90s. And in 1994, I attended a PsyCop conference. It was called PsyCop then, the Committee for Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. And they are like a skeptics society, you know. It's like, and they invited John Mack to speak, and then so they kind of beat up on him, you know, because Dr. John Mack was the guy who was like, he's the threat to the whole the skeptical notion that aliens aren't here, because this guy's got too much credibility. He shouldn't be talking about this. We got to put him down, you know.
Oh, no.
But you know, I've noticed that. So where we are now, it's like it's changed. It's not like it was in the 90s. The skeptics, I mean, part of it may be a bad thing, that maybe the skeptics don't want to talk up because they're afraid of like political violence or something, with all the conspiracy theories, with the rise of social media. Suddenly the conspiracy theorists can find each other, and so maybe there's some bad that's happened. Rise of populism, I'm very skeptical about. I don't think populism is necessarily the best movement. I believe in expertise. I believe in people like Carl Sagan. He might have been wrong on UFOs, but when it comes to science and space and evolution, he was right about all that stuff. So where we are now, the skeptics are a bit quieter for the most part, and then you have Michael Shermer, who has his like Skeptic magazine, but he's also got a YouTube channel, and now he's interviewing people like Avi Loeb, who's the Harvard scientist who's like trying to prove that extraterrestrial life exists, and so forth. So we've definitely changed in that area. I do still want to see more of the because Bud Hopkins has been gone since 2011, and John Mack since I believe 2004, and David Jacobs is still around, but you know, he's a little too much into the like they're here to take us over kind of thing, and not just like let's find out what's going on. You know, he's already got his mind made up about what's going on. But I'd like to see more, because those old abduction researchers, the hypnotherapists, the people who worked with the abductees back then, they were so important to me in my understanding and my research that I ended up doing. A number of the people I've talked to have worked with them, and then of course then there's other people who just had their own conscious memories. And a lot of people are people I meet online or at the local UFO groups, or when I've gone to UFO conferences. It's just things are in a different place now, but still I want to see the abductees and experiencers and contactees more willing to come out and speak. And I know why they don't. I mean, I'm trying to run a Facebook group for alien abductees, and you know, sometimes people are like sniping at each other, like I think it's demons, and I think it's like they're all friendly, and I think they're all evil and out to get us. You know, it's like, okay, just share your experience, okay, and just like, you know, let everyone draw their own conclusions. You know, like because a lot of times people are, you know, they're so concerned about their own narrative and promoting a narrative, and yeah, a lot of the ones who probably have the best experiences and the best pieces of the puzzle are keeping quiet because they don't want to get involved in all the noise and the attacks that go on. But I do want to see, we're in a different than we were in the 90s, that's sure.
Well, that's it. That's good to hear too from that perspective. In the 90s, my focus, although I did watch more of the mainstream shows, you know, in the 80s and 90s, like Unsolved Mysteries and things like that. And although I read a few of those books about UFOs, I can't remember the book series that there was on these types of things. They had one for Bigfoot, one for psychic psychic abilities, stuff like that. So I did breach that at some level, but just not. I wasn't as deeply integrated. But it is nice to see that bridge has been made, and more people are accepting. But I think you're right. If you have an experience, share it and share just as it is. And that is another problem with the online thing, the social media thing. People can put up an opinion, and 5 seconds after they posted it, get 32 people going, "Oh, you're a piece of garbage, and you're dumb, and you don't know what you're talking about." So it dissuades a ton of people from actually doing what they want to do with that. Um, you know, we're coming up almost to the time of the lightning round, but I want to ask you one question too, as far as it goes. Um, with the like forensic style of art that you would do with people and things of that nature, you said you've kind of given up on that, and at least as it pertains to the experience and stuff. Is there any creative art that you still enjoy doing, or something that you think that you may do in the near future? Because a lot of people really loved that art, and hearing you describe it as a means to an end, instead of more about, hey, I want to be passionate and make beautiful things. You might not be driven to do that anymore at all.
There will be more art from me. Kind of, I play around with like my old version of Photoshop all the time. But I mean, when's the last major thing I did was my friend Nancy Tremaine is a experiencer from the Northeast, and she had an encounter in the early 60s, I believe it was, where she met a reptilian. And she was given an image of the reptilian hand and her hand meeting, and like there was a silver ankh ring, and that's like in her telepathic communication from the reptilian, that image came through. And she was, I was kind of chosen to do the rendition for that, and so we did a cover for her book. But that was, I did that back in 2017. That's probably the last major thing I've done. There will be more coming. Right now, I'm kind of watching where the technology is going, and because I use Photoshop CS3, which is like a version from like over 10 years ago. Because now, if you want to be using Photoshop, you have to be a subscriber. Of course, I still occasionally will do something with pencil or something, but I haven't done really much of that in quite a while. So I'm watching where the technology is going, and eventually I will do more in this space. But so don't count me out entirely. But it's not really my thing. I figured I've kind of addressed the questions that I wanted to answer, and I just realized I'm not going to be able to answer those questions. So, but I do want to see more of the people who've had the experiences themselves get involved with using these technologies, or learning to draw, and then kind of get involved themselves in creating their own image to try to get it as accurate as they can to what they remember.
Well, I can definitely appreciate that. And, I am the guy who draws the stick figures, like you said earlier. Hopefully, we can get to a point with technology where I can do that. And I've tried Mid Journey and have gotten some decent responses, but most of it's just way, way off of what I'm trying to share. And unfortunately, I'm not intelligent enough, or actually, I am intelligent enough. I just haven't had the time to spend to learn the prompts and the correct wording to get it to do what I want it to do. But that's easier now than it ever was. So hopefully I'll get there one day. So now it's come time where we want to do the lightning round. These are some benevolent questions to get people to know you. Some people have been aware of your work for years. Some of them just might be meeting you today, but those are people here who have already gotten to know you, or who did know you. Let's get to know you on a human level. So I'll throw out some benevolent questions. If you want to pass, just say pass. But these are designed for us to get to know you a little better, if that sounds good to you.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. What's your favorite color?
Red.
Beautiful. I love that. All right. What's your favorite food?
Swiss cheese.
Oh, Swiss cheese. Nice. I am a connoisseur of the Swiss cheese myself. I do enjoy it. What is your favorite band and or song?
Tough one, but let's just go with Take on Me by Aha.
Oh, that's a great song. Yeah. We actually watched the video. Our daughter loves that video. She likes music videos. So perfect. What is your favorite animal?
Snake.
What breed of snake?
That's a tough one. I'll go with boa constrictor since I had one for 34 years.
I like that. I know you're a specialist in knowing the areas of the world and stuff too. I'm in Michigan, so there's not a huge diversity of snakes, but there's a lot of types of water snakes that are pretty common to the Midwest area and the Great Lakes area. You've not been in this region before, or have you been in this region just not by the Great Lake?
I'm sure, I know I've been to Chicago before, mostly passing through on the plane, but I did go to that Field Museum of Natural History there at one point when I was a child. But that's probably about as close to that. I might have been in Michigan before. I'm not sure, but I've been roughly in the Midwest Great Lakes area before.
All right. Well, I know like there's a Michigan rattler, which is the only snake that has some type of venom here, and then there's um the blue winder that goes on the. I don't know if it's a blue winder, but it's a top lake snake. Anyway, uh, out of this region, have you ever seen any of those snakes that are pretty common in this area, or is that something you haven't had the chance to go snake hunting while you're around here?
I haven't really had the chance. I have, when I was in Connecticut with my cousins back in '83, we did find a water snake when we were on a canoeing on a like a stream in a pond, and we caught a water snake, which was fun because that's the only water snake I ever caught. And like we saw it at the shore, and my uncle says, "Okay, David, you catch it." And of course I did, because I love catching snakes any opportunity I can get. And I guess I hadn't seen a water snake before, so I said, "Okay, are you sure this isn't venomous?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, I know what it is." Okay, so, but yeah, I don't catch the venomous ones, but yes, that's about as close to that area as far as catching snakes in that part of the country that I've done.
Yeah. Okay, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. What is your favorite place that you've ever been in nature for both the beauty of it and the feel to it?
Um, it's a good question. I love the frog mudflats and the lizard mudflats. These places near where I grew up in Monterey. But I'm going to say Pine Valley, which is in the Los Padres National Forest. It's like a big hike to get in there, but it's just like kind of south of Carmel Valley in the mountains there, and that's a very beautiful place.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I've never heard of that area, but definitely I'll look it up online. Um, Last question, unless I'm forgetting one, I probably am. What was your favorite childhood memory of all?
Okay, if we go back to 1983 when I was 12 at the time. It was I'd just been stuck in Hawaii for 4 years, where there are no snakes except for a blind snake, and I found one blind snake on a beach at night when I was catching sand crabs one time, and I thought it was a worm. So like I was disappointed in myself now looking back on it. It's like I should have caught that. It was actually a snake, but the blind snake is not a very spectacular snake. But so it finally got out of Hawaii. Then our first night in Monterey, we came back, And then the next day, my parents took me back to drop me and my brother off near the mud flats, the frog mud flats, and we walked down there. We found a place in the woods near the lizard mud flats where there were a couple boards on the ground. So this would have been like, I think it was May 27th, 1983. So late spring, when like that, at that time of year, it's a great time for snakes to be coming out. Usually April, May, June are the main months of snake activity in central coast of California. So we found these two large boards on the ground in this like little clearing just down below the lizard mudflats. And so we lifted the first board, and like we were just stunned. There was like two gopher snakes, like big, like 4 or 5 foot long gopher snakes, and then at least 4 ringnecks, I think it was. And so like I stood there dumbfounded, like we are just holding up the board for a moment, and then like I say, hey brother, you know, let's catch all these snakes, you know. And it's like, and so I don't know if one of the ringnecks might have got away, because there's little tiny things, but we caught them all. We put them in the bag we had. Then there was another board under that one. We found another gopher snake, and there was like a skink. We caught a skink, and I think there was an alligator lizard. So it's like all the reptiles were just like, maybe they just like had been like, while I was gone in Hawaii, they were like, okay, we don't have to worry about him catching us anymore, so we're just gonna chill now, you know. But I kind of see it as the universe like saying, thank you for enduring that period of time in Hawaii without snakes. Here you are, here's your reward. You know, that was, I gotta say, that's like my favorite childhood memory. And eventually we ended up letting those snakes go in Carmel. Sorry about disturbing the ecosystem and all, but that's just the way it worked out. You know, and then that evening I went down to the Carmel marsh, where the mouth of the delta, the mouth of the Carmel River is, and I caught 2 garter snakes under a board there. So that day, that whole day basically is like my favorite childhood memory.
That's amazing. Yeah, that I was just thinking that too before you said it. The universe's way of saying, "Hey, you endured enough without your friends. Welcome back." You know.
That's what it was.
Oh man, that's beautiful. So before we get to, I want to give you the floor to kind of share with people how to get in touch with you, or what type of work you've got going on that you're excited about, or projects you want to share. Anything that you just feel is good to share with people. I want to say, first of all, thank you for coming on tonight. I know we've been talking about this for a little bit, and I'm glad we got a chance to do it. And secondly, thank you for being you. I've always found you as a highly intelligent and very thoughtful person. And I really love the way that you share your passions with others, and share your insights with others, because it teaches people about a different perspective, but it also teaches people a lot of things that when your knowledge comes out and is shared with people, people are able to just connect to that energy so quickly, because of your personality, because of your kindness, because of your thoughtfulness, but just because most people can tell that you're a good dude. And thank you for being you, and thank you for being that good dude, and thank you for sharing your passions with others.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for saying that. I do on Facebook, you know, I do I have my issues with populism and with conspiracy theories, and with Vladimir Putin, and there are some problems in the world, and I have strong views on some things, but I do I try to be a good guy, and if anyone does want to get in touch with me, that would be the place to do it. Would be my Facebook page. Do you want me to give that now?
You can, and we'll link it in the description too. For those of you who are joining us live, you don't have access to that yet. We'll throw that in the chat room. If you want to send it to the private message, I'll put it in the chat for everybody. But also, if you're watching later, it will be in the description below. So yeah, that's a good way to get a hold of you. And what I found, even on things that I haven't fundamentally or deeply agreed with you about, on certain aspects of the world or how things are going, what I did find is that I'm still able to talk to you about it, both intelligently, talk to you about the subject and passionately exchange with each other without there being an anger, without there being. So if you're a type of person who can get along with anyone, despite your views or not, then even if you feel differently about those ways than David, it's not a bad thing. He communicates about his topics that he's passionate about extraordinarily well. So I will say that too for those of you who might not agree on certain things, you know. But it is great. So thank you, brother, for being on. Is there anything that you are working on that you might present to the public at a later time that you're excited about, or is it just we'll know when we see it type of thing?
You'll know when you see it, or maybe you'll be hearing more at some point. There's right now, this interview is what I'm presenting.
That's beautiful.
You can go to facebook.com/David W. Chace. That's my page. And remember that Chace is CHACE, not SE. It is CE.
All right, and if you get 1 second, I'm pulling up your page too, so that I can just paste that over into the chat. So, all right, guys, in the chat, I'm giving it to every platform now. You can look into the comment section as we speak, except for YouTube, who will watch it later. It'll be in the description for you guys. Well, thank you for joining me, brother. As always, these are always great, and I know that the week previous guest, when it airs on YouTube on the 27th, the guy who's coming on the 20th, I haven't interviewed him yet. We're going to do the interview as a pre-record next week for when I am in Sedona. But I know he'll be extremely interested in watching this because he follows a lot of what you do and share very strongly. He's been a fan of yours forever, CM Kozman. I think I showed you the link where we talked about you on that last show. So he'll be really happy to hear this one. Shout out to you, CM Kozman, and I'll be talking to you next week. And thank you, brother, for being here so much.
You're welcome.
Means the world.
And CM Kozman, thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, he's a great dude. All right, everybody. We will be here next week live when you're hearing this. Well, if you're hearing it live and if you're hearing it at a replay, I will be here live with you the next week. And we will also be sharing some more information about upcoming guests as we get there. We appreciate all of your love and support. Thank you guys for being active in the chat. Thank you, Matrix Minds, for being here today with us live. And we'll see you guys next week on Wednesday, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific on the Enlightenment Evolution Hour as a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one.